Welcome to the Room of Lives. I'm your host, Neil. In this second part of my conversation with neuroscience student May, we discuss the idea of holding lightly in relationships and even in science. We then talk about jealousy and the utility of anger.
There's this concept that's kind of related called holding lightly. Have you heard this?
No.
Holding lightly is kind of what you've employed in yourself with this relationship as you let it go, where it's kind of like being outcome agnostic. Do you know this?
Yeah. I mean, I can guess what it is.
You can guess, yeah. So I think maybe outcome agnostic is actually a really good definition for holding lightly, or a preface for. And so being outcome agnostic is not so much that you just don't care, that you're not nihilistic. You don't think that nothing matters, but it's like I go into this relationship and I know that on the other end I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be good, and I know that I want to do good for
Beautiful.
others.
May I love listening to you. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah,
you make it easy to share.
Yeah.
But so this is something that I practice a lot, and I think it helps me with not getting frustrated when people say shit, like when I get misgendered or when something happens. I hold lightly because the outcome doesn't matter, you know, in the end. And it's not that I don't care, not that I don't have a preference, but it's like when I go into a relationship, I know that I'm going to do my best.
Yeah.
And I hope that someone else is going to do their best. And whether the relationship succeeds or fails is not a judgment on me or on them or on the world or on life. It's just what happened.
Yeah.
You know? And so when you go in with no expectation that it needs to succeed, because a lot of people will hold very tightly.
Yeah.
You know, you get in a relationship and you're like, we need to hold this together. We need to make this work or we failed.
Yeah.
You know, or we were bad.
Yeah.
And people can't handle that failure. They feel so rejected and unimportant and unvaluable.
Yeah.
And it's very hard on their egos and on their hearts. They feel like having failed this relationship has some large unshakable consequence for the person that they are. They're like, I am a bad person because I could not, and especially if you really liked the person that you worked with.
Or even like they are a bad person.
Right, like someone has to be bad.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if, let's say, you know, I really, really liked this girl that I was with, and she leaves me, if I was holding very tightly, like, that is so shaking for the core of who I am.
Yeah.
But if I was holding lightly, I can say, I wasn't right for her, and that's okay. You know, that was not the right place for her, and I'm glad that she's in a better place. I hope she's in a better place. And you know, it's going to hurt me to lose this relationship. I'm going to be sad about it. I'll have emotions. But I know that I'll be okay. I'll move on. And then it'll ultimately be better for me. Because if I wasn't right for her, then it doesn't matter how much I liked her. She wouldn't have been right for me. Because it wouldn't have been a good relationship for her. And you know.
I feel like what you're talking about here is like seeing through into a deeper value.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Multiple times I have been a part of this, and I see this happening many times in relationships around me.
Yeah.
Where because you've made your ultimate value this thing of having to hold on to the relationship.
Yes.
The ways in which you make yourself act or make the other person act is corrupting you spiritually deeper within.
I agree wholeheartedly. That is so true. You're
And
more
because
likely to try to force someone into a box that doesn't fit them because you're not willing to let go.
Yeah.
You're not holding lightly.
Yeah. In a way, so this is kind of funny. This happened at the beginning of what I would call my spiritual career.
I like that.
At the beginning of my spiritual career,
what's your career? What are you selling? What are you
what I'm selling?
What are you creating?
I'm trying to create love.
I like that. That's a good output.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll give it away for free, I'm sure.
Yeah, holding lightly love, you know, radiating outwards love. So
continue.
In the beginning of my spiritual career, I had a girlfriend who at first was a short distance girlfriend. We were in the same city.
Yeah.
It became a long distance relationship, and then I was like, hey, let's do open relationship.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, sure, let's do it. So we were doing open relationship, and then she started hanging out with this guy quite a bit, and I was like, yeah, that's the terms of our contract. I guess it's fine. But then she was doing it in some ways where she wouldn't tell me certain things, or like kind of like weird, like under the table kind of stuff.
It started creating disconnects between you.
Yeah, and that was not part of our contract. The part of our contract was like, I was like, the most important thing is that we stay in complete communication and honesty.
We're honest.
And that wasn't happening, and I started feeling jealous. And I felt very bad about feeling jealous, because I was like, what kind of spiritual path are you on, Neil? Where you shouldn't be feeling
you're
this
letting
jealous.
Yourself be corrupted.
Yeah, you're feeling this jealous. This is a base feeling. So what I did was I tried to suspend and deny my jealousy. And this went on for a long time, and it did not lead me to a good place in this relationship. It eventually sank, and by the time it sank, I realized that I had done a lot of. I had caused myself a lot of violence.
You damaged yourself,
and I felt like the reason that I denied all of that, because I really wanted to hold on to the relationship.
You were holding tightly.
Yeah.
No,
so it was weird, because it was a mindfuck. I thought I was doing it for my spiritual progress, but I really wasn't.
Yeah.
Because if I was, now I realize that there are two parties in this. I need to love myself too. And I was completely denying my needs, because I thought that was the more spiritual thing to do. But I think I was hogwashing. I was trying to brainwash myself into thinking that's spiritual, but really under
you were gaslighting yourself.
Yeah.
And yes, I think with these negative emotions that we identify as bad, like jealousy or anger, people want to fight them away. They don't like them. They feel like it makes you a bad person to have that emotion. You know, and it makes you a bad person. That's too strong. It's no good to be controlled by those emotions.
Yeah.
But it is great to have them.
Yeah.
You know, when you were feeling jealous, you weren't feeling jealous because you weren't okay with her enjoying her life and loving others. You were feeling jealous because your emotional needs were no longer being met properly, and you didn't feel connected to your relationship.
Yeah.
It wasn't about this other guy.
Right now, even looking back from this point of view, where I'm so over that relationship, I would say I respect that feeling of jealousy that was coming up. It was trying to point me towards something,
it was telling you something
that I morally was not okay with.
Yeah, it felt bad for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think our jealousies can get they can mutate.
Yeah.
And so at some point it's like your jealousy is just bad. It's not giving you anything. It's not telling you something's wrong, maybe with your relationship, but it's just like you just have kind of, as you say, like your spiritual, you've done violence to yourself, and like your spirit is clouded with something that is like this phrasing is not great, but it's like you've let Satan into your heart. You know, like you've let something take a home in you that doesn't serve you anymore. And it's you're now wielding that violence onto others.
Yeah.
But I think that again, everything's a double-sided coin. Everything's double-edged. So jealousy and anger, like anger makes you fight for yourself. It makes you hold firm boundaries. And Mika said something so good earlier. Do you remember what it was about anger?
What was it?
What did she call it? She say
she needed to be angrier.
Yes.
But
there was a term she used where she was like, I needed to protect myself. It was like she did this like house motion around herself, as if like her anger was what held up her boundaries sometimes. Like she was letting people walk over her, and her therapist said to her once, you should be angry about that. That wasn't okay what that person did. And what she learned out of that was that anger tells you when your boundaries are being crossed, and it tells you when you need to fight for yourself and advocate for yourself. It can totally swing in the other direction, where like Mika was someone who wasn't accessing her anger in a way that it was hurting her to not access it. But then other people, they let it guide them all the time. It's like they're totally run by their anger. And this is kind of maybe closer to how you felt when you were like, someone would do something and you would get angry and you would lash out, and you were not using it as just an emotional impetus to make an action, but it was running that entire action.
Yeah.
And it wasn't good at it. It was good at telling you needed to do something, but it was actually just causing more damage because it was violent in how it was releasing itself.
A lot of Buddhist theory is actually about this.
Release?
About this kind of this dilemma that we're talking about.
The balance between,
Because it says that the middle path is one where you do not succumb to your gut instincts. I'm going to lash out.
Right.
But also you don't go in the other direction where you suppress the feelings that
Right.
are coming up.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
It's true.
So you sit and you really pay attention to what's coming up,
Yeah.
but you don't do the snap.
No.
You don't do the immediate reaction.
Yeah.
And
you have to balance it, and it's like a never-ending balancing game where like you're always trying. So sometimes you won't listen, and sometimes you will lash out, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can hold lightly to yourself too. That like when you fail these moments, not when you fail, but like when you don't behave what you feel is like your capacity in that moment, you say okay, and you learn from it, and you let
that's
it go.
the other part of your thing that you wrote to me in my email that I resonated with it a lot, because I feel like I have a hard time doing that. Like I feel like, damn Neil, you couldn't do that thing that you could have done better. And a lot of the times for me, I feel like there is very little room within myself for me to fail in along the dimensions in which I really want to get better. It's like there's a lot of my troubles can be summed up to, why am I not spiritually perfect yet?
You gotta let it go.
If I understand
you are,
the
actually,
principle,
you are. You will never be better or worse than you are.
But this holding lightly thing, where you're like holding really tightly to the outcome, I've noticed repercussions of this within science as well.
Oh, for sure.
I was working
people
with
want their results so bad.
They want to fucking twist the arm of nature and torture it until it confesses the things that will get their things published and make them famous. And I think even if you get to those results, it's going to spiritually corrupt you.
Yeah.
And I think you need some spiritual clarity in order for nature to speak to you in its truest.
I agree. I think the hardest part and the saddest part for me is like, it's environmental. Like, it's not on people. It is in some ways. People propagate these systems, but like we're living in an environment that is not conducive to good work. It's not conducive to good spirit, and so when these people, they want to fudge their results, they want to change things, is because they think that if they feel that if they do that, and they're actually right, that if they do that, they're more likely to get the things that bring them other happiness, other progress. They want a strong career. They want their ideas to be listened to. They want to be respected. They want power. They want friends. They want to feel important, and all of those things are reasonable desires, actually. But they get corrupted so easily, and the ecosystem that science lives in right now doesn't make you want to do good work. It makes you. It makes it easier.
It's
like
capitalism. There's a whole.
Well, that's the ecosystem, right?
Oh, the ecosystem. I heard ecosystem.
No.
The ecosystem.
The ecosystem of capital. It's like academia shouldn't be a business. Knowledge should not be for sale.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if you're working in a university or you're working in industry, all of your research has to be lucrative in some way. You have to be able to show why it'll be profitable in some regard, or you need to be able to beg from the government for some social service, and our capitalist system doesn't really like to give money to those social services anyways. So you're clawing against people who should be your compatriots, and so many of those things offer social good, but they're not monetary good. They're not like it's like planned obsolescence, right? Where like you could Sear and Roebuck like put themselves out of business because they made really freaking good dryers. And they made them so good that people didn't have to buy more dryers. And so they ran out of business.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's good. I think you should get rewarded. Your business is done. You've succeeded. Yeah. You should get something for that, right? Like, create an incentive to work yourself out of a job, to fix the problem so good that it stays fixed for a long time. And you can now transition your energy to something else. And then if you keep doing this, it's like moving, it's like changing your mind, where if you keep doing these little tasks over and over again that have long-term benefit, and you keep doing them, you keep finding new ones, then eventually you're in a way better place than you were before. Like, you look back and it's amazing how far you've come. But you have to keep just taking those small steps.
Yeah, because so the way that you're talking about it, do you feel like the remedy to this situation is a systemic one that tries to change the ecosystem? Because so one part of my mind is like, man, the ecosystem is this big machine that I'm in, and I have very limited ability to change the ecosystem in which I do science. There's capitalism involved. There's like the whole world right now is going in the direction of, you mentioned something about why you don't want to be on a podcast. It's like this a lot of podcasts is like, we gotta make like a really flashy marketable product out of this. It's such a draining rat race. It's speeding up everywhere.
And it feels very not humble. Again, it's like corrupting to spirit. It feels like in order to succeed at these things, I have to do things that go against the kind of world that I want to live in.
Yeah.
They're actively in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So one way could be like, hey man, this. So what I feel is like the machine is too big, and the way that I have been thinking lately is, I'm not going to worry so much about the ecosystem. I'm going to draw my sphere of responsibility back into myself. And my theory now is that the environment and the individual are constantly creating each other.
Absolutely.
And so I'm going to try and create as best as I can the environment around myself. And I know that I'm pushing against an oncoming tsunami, but I'm going to try and do it as best as I can. And let's just see what happens.
And then once you have this like secure sense of self, you can start feeding it outwards. You can start like you it's like planting a garden, where once it's growing, at some point it starts making more than you can use.
Yeah.
And then you start giving it out. Yeah. But at first you actually need things to come in. You need to reduce your focus until the soil is fertile.
Yeah.
And
I feel like people see that,
They feel it.
People
you
come
can
at some point and they're like, hey man, you're doing something here that flies in the face of this pressure from the ecosystem, and I like it.
It moves their minds.
Yeah.
They see it, and have you read Snow Crash?
No.
Snow Crash is this old book. It's where the term metaverse was coined.
Oh, really?
If that tells you anything.
Okay.
But it's this guy, he writes this dystopian satire on America. It's so funny. It's really over the top. It's really like whatever. But one of the like core.
Is it like Infinite Jest or?
I haven't read Infinite Jest, but I think they're like kind of similar. Not like similar, but like their like emotional center is from a similar place. I think a little bit. But point of this being that there's this concept in it of like thoughts as viruses.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard of this.
The first time I encountered that idea was in Richard Dawkins's book, The Selfish Gene, where he opens a chapter asking, what is life? If you're trying to find life in a different on a different planet, we have to have some working definition. If you go back to your biology textbooks, there are mutually contradictory definitions. We can't even figure out what's a virus, is life or not, blah, blah. And he came up with this idea of a living thing is anything that makes copies of itself that are slightly mutated, and these copies fight amongst each other.
So ideas are alive.
Yeah, and so he was like, ideas are alive, music is alive.
Yes.
And so he came up with the idea of memes. He called it
and they
memes.
Flow. Yes.
And memetics, and that was the first time that he coined the term memes.
So I think actually Snow Crash built on that idea of memes. Or I don't know the time course of the situation, but I think they co-created around one another.
Yeah.
But it's true. I think about that a lot. Where like you and I are gonna go home with like little things swimming around in our minds.
Viruses from each other.
I don't like using the word virus actually because it feels like giving each other a plant.
Okay.
Like I've introduced some new life into your ecosystem.
Right
Yeah.
May, we wanted to be liked by you.
But it's like you plant a seed and then it germinates and it grows and then it starts moving things in your mind. Like I really like this idea that the mind is something that is malleable and it takes shape and it takes time to move. You can't just and we're good at moving it. Like we can change our minds very quickly, but in the grand scheme of things, how quick can we change ourselves and our habits and our instincts? And I think these memes and these like little plants that we give to one another, they grow and they take root and they hold, and if the soil is fertile for them, they will grow into it and they will start changing it and adding new things. They'll draw in new nutrients. They'll interact with the plants that already exist. Sometimes they're invasive. Sometimes they just totally take over. And other times they're like really beneficial. They save the ecosystem where like it's lacking some some nutrient, and it starts drawing it in and fixing it into the world inside of you.
Thanks for joining me and May today in the Room of Lives. In the next part of our conversation, she talks about her habit of walking into people's mind mansions, opening doors, looking at things, and rearranging them.